Welcome everybody. As people come, I will just Derek and I will just let them come into the room. Glad to see you here tonight. As you probably caught on, some of us are complaining about our favorite teams and hoping that Steve will enlighten us on how bad they really are. Also, I hope Steve's going to tell us where this Fantasy Writers Hall of Fame is actually located so I can visit it, that I understand he's in. He's been to about 15 or 16 more World Series than I've ever been to. He's just full of information, been around the game for ages, and I'm sure he's got some great information for us. And of course, he'll probably answer as many questions as you have for us. So another brief, just quick announcement. Minnesota, beginning of August, SABR convention. Come on out. If you're from the Minnesota area and you can only come for a day, come for a day. Lots of fun. They're promising some new things this year. They don't tell Derek and I what they are yet, but should be fun. I've been to a few and they're always fun. So Steve, I'm just going to drop it to you.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody, and appreciate you tuning in. I am Steve Gardner. My official title at the very moment is MLB and breaking news reporter for USA Today Sports, but I've had a number of job titles, and I think that's how I've been able to survive in this crazy business for as long as I have. I started with Gannett, the parent company of USA Today, in 1993. We were doing a news by phone type service, and that folded after a couple years, but then the internet kicked in, usatoday.com started, and I started work there and have been there with USA Today in some capacity since then. So as you guys saw from my bio, I'm a member of the Baseball Writers Association of America, Hall of Fame voter since 2021, and have been covered 18 World Series, many spring trainings, and just baseball in general. So it's great game to be around. I've loved the game for an awfully long time. I guess maybe from back when I was growing up in Charlottesville, Virginia, when I grew up a Baltimore Orioles fan, and would get a couple of games on TV, a month, but otherwise would spend a lot of time listening to the family radio and trying to pull in stations from Washington to get the Orioles games, listening to Chuck Thompson, John Miller on the broadcasts. And that's, you have those guys in your ears, night in, night out over the summertime. You can certainly develop a love of baseball, and that's what I did. As a kid, I can remember, going through box scores, reading the local newspaper, on the living room floor because my arms were too short to hold up the newspaper itself. So I'd get down there and I'd get newsprint all over my forearms. But I would love to just sit there, look at the box scores, the standings, the Sunday papers, with all the averages, and kind of fell in love with, the names of the game. My brother and I would go out and play wiffle ball, and we would be those players, as many kids have been. And I was fascinated with the names, not only Willie Stargell and Dave Concepcion and Sal Bando, but some of the obscure ones as well, like Baltimore Orioles legend, you may remember him, Drungo Hazelwood, fantastic player. No, he wasn't. He was very bad. But we still would take our turns taking hacks as Drungo Hazelwood there in the front yard and tried to hit the wiffle ball on the roof. But, in terms of those names, and falling in love with the names of the baseball players, my brother and I sort of started making up our own names. And, in between Ken Singleton and Ed Murray, we'd throw in, Sidney Huante or something like that, guys that we had made up to the point where we'd made up our own teams. And my first baseball game that I really played was just a simple little dice baseball game where 2 dice, and you roll it, and 1-1 is a single and 6-6 is a home run. And it took maybe 10 minutes to play a game, and I would always keep score because I love to do that. And I would play entire seasons, first of the Orioles in the mid to late 70s, and then developing my own roster with my own players and teams that I made up and play against my brother's teams. And I like to feel like that I invented interleague play when I was making these entire seasons worth, because I would play every single major league team because I wanted to learn their lineups. I wanted to play against those guys with my guys. And so I had a season schedule that had all the major league teams that we played against. So that was kind of my introduction to baseball games. I had a subscription to Baseball Digest as a kid, and that saw the ads for APBA and Stratomatic, but never really caught the bug in those games. And I kind of wonder what I missed by not digging into that as so many have in their younger years. For me, I think I transitioned a little bit from just that simple dice baseball game to football games. I had an electric football game. I had the talking football game where you put like the records in and you push it in and then it plays a play-by-play. I don't know if anybody had that game or not, but it was Dick Enberg that actually did the play-by-play for that. And I love that game. The game that I really enjoyed as a kid was a football game called NFL Strategy. And basically what it was is you picked an offensive play and your opponent picked a defensive alignment, and you put them together and you slid them into the board, and you had a little bead that you pulled down and it randomly bounced around, and it gave you the results there. And I thought that was really cool because then strategy came into it. It wasn't just the game playing itself. There was a strategy to it. There was also a college basketball game that was locally produced in the mid-Atlantic states that featured ACC college basketball teams. So, that was when, NC State won the national championship one year. North Carolina had James Worthy and Sam Perkins and Michael Jordan. The University of Virginia there in Charlottesville was very good. Ralph Sampson, that was about his time too. So there was this 3 dice game that we played college basketball, and it was really cool. My roommate, when I went to college, my roommate and I played that incessantly in between times when we were supposed to be studying and we were supposed to be out partying and everything else. We had a few marathon sessions of playing this ACC action basketball game. But anyway, as I learned more and more about sports, I kind of wanted to, from a young age, be a broadcaster, and it helped that we had a friend of the family in Charlottesville, and I was growing up, by the name of John Gordon. And I don't know if anybody's a Minnesota Twins fan here, but John Gordon was the play-by-play announcer for University of Virginia football and basketball. He went from UVA to the Columbus Clippers, then to the New York Yankees for maybe 1 year, ran into the Steinbrenner buzzsaw, but landed on his feet, and was the longtime radio announcer for the Minnesota Twins. And so just having a mentor, somebody I could look up to, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into broadcasting. And so I would broadcast, a comment, as a lot of kids did when we were playing games, playing basketball or playing wiffle ball or whatever, and kind of announce as the game was going on, much to the dismay of some of the people that I was playing against. But nevertheless, I continued to do it. And in college, it helped kind of kickstart my career because I did some broadcasting in college. But while I was there and I was playing the dice basketball game and studying and everything else, that was kind of the period when Bill James came along, and some internet and computer message boards came along, the Rec Sport Baseball that a lot of people, kind of cut their teeth on sabermetrically. And I missed out some of the days of the early days of fantasy baseball too. So I didn't start playing fantasy baseball until after I began my career and began working at usatoday.com in the late 90s. And a group of folks in the office said, "Hey, you want to play fantasy baseball?" Sure, I love fantasy baseball, I think. Yeah, let me play and see how I do. One of the things, the responsibilities that I had when I was starting out at usatoday.com was we would post online some of the content that was in that day's paper or in Baseball Weekly, and which became Sports Weekly. One of those things that I would make sure that it was my job to post online every week was the fantasy column written by one John Hunt. Now, John Hunt was, one of the founding fathers of fantasy baseball writing. He wasn't necessarily an expert in the field, but he was very good at reaching out to people, writing about what people were interested in, new things that came along, and he helped develop some new products and new things in the fantasy baseball world. Among them, the first Fantasy Baseball Experts League, which he started in 1994. And you may know that it's still going on now. It's the League of Alternative Baseball Reality, which we lovingly refer to as LABR. So while I was posting John Hunt's columns online, I was also obviously reading them, learning about them, getting involved and seeing some of the strategies and the players and things that were important to learn and to know if you're going to be a successful fantasy player. So that was kind of my introduction to fantasy sports. Just so happened that in 2005, John Hunt kind of asked me if I would like to have a team in LABR. And this was just, unbelievably great honor. I got to go to Arizona where the drafts were held, the auctions, and got to auction a team. I had no idea what the heck I was doing. But I was able to assemble a team. And it was not a great team. I can't remember how I finished, but it was not close to first. But then the following year, John Hunt ended up leaving the company. And all of a sudden, there was a position that was vacant and nobody to take over that column. And I had the boss at Sports Weekly ask me, do you think you could write a fantasy baseball column? And of course, me being the ambitious kid that I was, said, well, of course I can. I can write a fantasy baseball column. I know all about fantasy baseball. I did not know. But I guess somehow or another, just the baseball knowledge, writing about baseball. I was, by that point, the online baseball editor for usatoday.com. So I had an idea of what I wanted and what we wanted to have online, some of the things that were doing well that people like to read. And so I kind of took some of John's ideas, his traditions that he had, and just continued to build on those and took over the column. And not only that, I took over having to be the commissioner of LABR as well. But that's something that I enjoyed because, again, I love keeping the stats and keeping everything neat and organized and all of that. And it fit in perfectly for my skill set in that regard. The learning curve was pretty steep, I have to admit. Print was still very prestigious in those days. You had a lot of eyeballs on what you wrote, and you had a lot of people writing in, whether it happened to be letters, phone calls, faxes occasionally, and then email sort of became the de facto way to communicate. But there are a lot of passionate people out there reading Sports Weekly's fantasy column and looking for fantasy coverage, looking for LABR coverage. It was funny because we had kind of a policy that we would have the LABR drafts in early March, and then it took a couple of weeks before we would get all the results printed in Sports Weekly. And so we had to have everybody kind of take a vow of secrecy not to reveal any of the things that had gone on until we could publish it in print. And there was no immediate coverage of anything like that. And so that was kind of difficult. And then we kind of allowed people to write about their teams, but nobody else's, which led to a whole bunch of internet sleuths who would read, Jeff Erickson's piece on RotoWire and Ron Chandler's piece on baseballhq.com and all of this sort of stuff and kind of piece everything together, kind of the wild west of the internet. But that was fun as well. But continued to grow. I hope to get better and improve my writing and my analysis. And I counted them up one time. I'm like right at around 500 columns in Sports Weekly since then. and I'm still writing them, but not every week anymore the way I used to. So it's been great. It's been a huge part of my life, and I've dedicated an awful lot to that. And as you alluded to earlier, there is a Fantasy Sports Writers Hall of Fame, not a physical building, unfortunately, but we do have little plaques. And one of these days, maybe it'll be like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they didn't have a building for a while. Maybe someday we'll have a building. Um, I wanted to talk a little bit more too about the games part, the sim games, and involvement. Thankfully, as my job at USA Today, doing baseball for the website, and having the column and looking for column ideas, I was able to and have been able to get in touch with some of the people from APBA and Stratomatic and the sim game companies, and been able to work some of that into our coverage. For instance, 2008, we had a project where, the end of Yankee Stadium was getting torn down. New Yankee Stadium was getting built, and we had a huge commemorative issue of Sports Weekly dedicated to Yankee Stadium and Yankee Stadium memories. One of the things that I contributed to that um, was in conjunction with the APBA people, and I can't remember exactly how it worked, how we got in touch with each other or what, but we had the idea to kind of simulate the best Yankee teams of all time in kind of a season and playoffs against each other. And they were able to, we got the rosters together, and they were able to simulate, I believe, a season's worth of games among all of the great Yankee teams. I think we picked maybe 12 different Yankees teams, from the 27 Yankees all the way through, I guess, the great 99, 98, 99, 2000 Yankees. Somewhere in there, I think maybe 98 was the Yankees team we used there. And we played out the season, simulated it, and then had a World Series playoffs. And it turned out, I think it was be interesting to see who you all thought maybe the greatest Yankee team of all time. Could throw the floor open now for nominations if you wanted to just guess for the heck of it. Anybody?
1927.
Never has been a good one. I hate the Yankees.
Ah, yes.
1927 Yankees.
27 was the one that I thought, because we think about them as the quintessential Yankees team. The one that won it, though, was the 36 Yankees, which was a Lou Gehrig's second MVP year, and the year that 21-year-old rookie by the name of Joe DiMaggio came up and was an everyday player for them. So that was kind of an interesting thing, gave us a unique thing to write about and talk about as part of that package. Sorry for the Yankees detour there. I'll make it up to you later. What else? Stratomatic. Another thing was able to do with Stratomatic is they came up with a baseball daily league. If you've ever you're a fan of Stratomatic, this was around like 2016. They came up with an idea that kind of blended the score sheet, players, what they're doing now, their current stats, and the Stratomatic cards. And they decided that one of the ways that they would promote that would be to get a media experts league and get different people, writers. Hal Richman, the founder, had a team, and get everybody into this league, and give it a test drive, and also get a lot of publicity. I was floored that they asked me, because some of the people that they had in the league was just like a who's who of my favorite people in the industry. Joe Posnanski was one, longtime Stratomatic player. John Miller, again, getting to play in a league with a guy that I idolized when I was growing up. Will Leach, from Deadspin, and he was with Sports on Earth, which was tied in with USA Today at the time. Joe Sheehan, who I'm sure you guys know from Baseball Prospectus. Gordon Eads of the Boston Globe. Jack Curry from Yes. Doug Glanville, former major leaguer. And we all got together and played. And somehow or another, my team ended up winning. And it was one of those where the best trade that I never made ended up being what propelled me to a championship. I actually, this was kind of me trying to fanboy a little bit. I had Buster Posey was one of my top picks, and so I tried. John Miller had Bryce Harper, and so I tried to work out a trade with John Miller's where I could get Bryce Harper and trade him Buster Posey so that he could have the hometown guy and I could have the hometown guy here in DC. Um, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and I kept Posey. He ended up being the MVP of the league and leading me to the championship. So that was a really cool thing for my kind of like my first introduction to Stratomatic. And finally, I think the biggest sim game that's made an impact on me is Dynasty League Baseball. And this is a game that was originally called Pursue the Pennant. But Mike Sislinski, who is the game designer for Dynasty League Baseball, got in touch with me right around 2009. And this was in a kind of a transition period for USA Today and usatoday.com. We had merged the print and the online sides, which had been mostly separate. We would, like I said, we would post stories from the newspaper, but in terms of working together, coming up with story ideas, that sort of thing, we'd been completely separate. And there was kind of a contentious relationship. And in 2009, they basically told me, all right, you either stay on the online side and work with the baseball folks on the new baseball desk, or you continue doing fantasy and you're going to be pretty much on your own. We'll give you a blog and you can continue doing fantasy, but you're not going to be a part of baseball. Well, having covered all the World Series and everything, but still, just starting to grow into this role as a fantasy sports person, it was a really difficult decision for me. And I decided to stay with the fantasy stuff, ended up not getting to go cover the World Series for the first time in 10 years. But that 2009 World Series gave me an opportunity to work with Mike Sislinski and Dynasty League Baseball. The idea was we would put together a simulated World Series that we would play before the actual game to give us, kind of a preview of what might happen. And that was my job, was to kind of make it into a baseball-y kind of piece so that we could tell people what might happen, what to watch for. If the Yankees are throwing a left-hander, what are the Phillies going to do? That sort of thing. So usually, I mean, and I'm sure you all know, when you do simulations, one simulation is not going to predict what happens in the real thing. You need many, many, many simulations over and over. We didn't have time for that, obviously. So I was able to convince my bosses to let me write about it, let us play these games out, and just see what happens. Turns out we pretty much nailed it spot on. We had the Yankees winning in 6 games, which they did. We had Hideki Matsui having the best series of anybody and winning MVP honors, which he did. And all of a sudden, this was just an eye-opening moment for me. I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. The games were fun to play. We did it online. There's a dice roller and everything, and a little play-by-play window that gives you, kind of commentary on what's going on. And this was just a fascinating thing for me. Mike Sislinski and I kind of developed a relationship to where he felt comfortable inviting me into his league, his home league, that he started way back whenever the game kind of went live. I've been in that league for a while, and it's really one of my most enjoyable leagues. It's the format of you have an auction, you have keepers, you have contracts for 3-4 years, and you have a minor league roster and all sorts of things like that. It's tremendous fun. Trades, playoffs at the end of the year, and one of the things I think Ron mentioned in his talk, that fantasy sports, the fantasy season kind of leaves you a little bit empty at the end of the regular season when the real teams are having playoffs, and the most exciting time of the season, the World Series, you're already done. And that's what I think I love about the sim games, is that you get to have that World Series. You get to have that one game where you've got to win, you've got to make the decisions, and I like that a whole lot. And I think that's one of the things that has me coming back year after year. I also will say one other thing too about the sim games that I really love. I think it's helped me as a baseball writer, because you have to, if you're going to win, you have to outthink your opponent. You have to be one step ahead, two steps ahead, maybe three steps ahead in trying to make your decisions about pinch hitting, bullpens, relievers, strategy, things like that. And I can remember specifically when I was covering the 2011 World Series, the Cardinals and the Texas Rangers, and Ron Washington was there with the season on the line and was just making mistake after mistake after mistake in his lineup, and pinch hitting and substituting or not substituting, as the case may be, and just thinking about how, oh man, if I were managing this team in Dynasty League Baseball, I would definitely not be doing that. I would be doing this. And so I feel like it's made me be able to understand the game better, the real game, to be able to write about it, to be able to explain it. And I think that's one of the things that that it's one of those moments where it's just like everything comes together, and you feel like, this relates to this. I had no idea how much those two are intertwined and related. And I think baseball is one of the sports, maybe the sport that best allows you to do that. There's so many intricacies, different things now we're seeing with all the new stats and statcast and everything else. We're learning more and more and more. And I think that's the great thing about baseball, is you're able to go as deep as you want. And even for somebody who kind of missed the sabermetric revolution or the sabermetric wave as it was coming in with Bill James, I've kind of been able to catch on to that a little bit, reading Baseball Prospectus, reading Baseball HQ, and Ron and all of the great writers that have come along since, to be able to understand the game better. And then playing the games as well, I think also adds to that knowledge and that enjoyment. So that's kind of where I am, and I hope I've entertained you and informed you, and would happy to be to answer any questions you have.
I just wanted to mention, thanks for bringing up Mike Cislinski. He was one of the guests on our discussion panel at the Sabre 51 in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, we talked quite a bit about the Dynasty League game. We had a 64-team tournament.
Oh, nice.
So that we had a blast with that. Unfortunately, I was bounced in the first round of that. But
I love one of the things that I love about that too is that the game has all of those old time or a lot of those old time teams, even like the 24 Washington Senators, and stuff like that, where you can pick. I love going back and being the 70 Orioles, with Frank Robinson and Brooks Robinson and the great pitching staff and stuff like that. Again, another way to learn baseball history. Go back and be the 55 Dodgers or whatever. That's really fun too, to know, gee, Ted Williams this one year had really horrible splits against left-handed pitching, things of that nature. So yeah, it's a fabulous game. It really is.
Yeah, and it was fun to play. It was fun to watch. Obviously, being bounced after the first round, I was just an observer, but just to see how people manage their bullpens and different things, there was, the fatigue with different pitchers, and okay, you advanced to the third or the fourth round. Who's your starting pitcher today?
Right.
That type of thing. Are you going to pitch the right-hander against a team that's stacked with lefties, or are you going to use, you've got a southpaw, but maybe he's your third best pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of stuff. So.
One of the things too, remember when the novelty of the Rays, when they first started using the opener, I remember when they did that, I was like, I can totally see doing that in my Dynasty League baseball sim. Like that would make total sense to get, left-handers against a couple of the lefties at the top of the order, and then go to
Yeah.
your long reliever if you didn't have a starting pitcher available or whatever. I thought that was pretty ingenious of the Rays folks.
This might be a sore point for Mark, but I recall, I think it was the 85 AL playoffs when the Royals had, I'm going to forget who the pitchers were, but they had somebody in there for 3 innings. Then they brought in the right-hander, and Bobby Cox, unloaded his bench, brought all the lefties in, and then they brought the left-hander back in. So I don't know. Cliff Johnson was out of the lineup, and that type of, like you said, thinking ahead 2 or 3 steps. Well, if I bring this guy in, he's going to take this guy out. Then I can bring Quisenberry in, and he doesn't have to face any lefties. So, but that's part of the strategy, right?
The reason the Jays lost that to Kansas City is because the grounds crew moved in the fences, hoping the Jays would get more home runs, and then they got beat by that by George Brett. Now, I don't know how much it's documented, but that had been the story that had been going around for many years after, that they had brought the fences in without telling anybody, and that's what cost them. Now, I see Jeremy wants to talk. Jeremy, I thought you were a St. Louis fan.
I am. You don't see my Cardinals hat?
Oh, I love that hat. I love that hat.
Yeah. I actually got it there in Chicago at SABR 51 last year.
Oh,
man, I wish which was right next to the hotel.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, so bringing up 1985, I was going to ask who won that World Series, because in St. Louis, we like to believe the Cardinals won that World Series. Don Deakinger is as famous as Angel Hernandez is around here. So we would have been happy to see his retirement right after that game. So I have a couple of thoughts. The Dynasty League, yeah, I just was introduced to it last year, and we loved it. I loved the tournament. I played as the 1942 St. Louis Cardinals, and just the game, the simulation, just being able to get to know the players is just fascinating. And I wrote trivia questions for our local chapter here in St. Louis. This year, actually next month, I'm writing questions over the 44 season. So I'm trying to get more familiar with the Browns players, actually. So I'm going to write questions about both Browns and Cardinals. So the simulation games do a wonder as far as getting to know players and kind of their skill level and stuff like that. Let's see. Then I was looking at your TGFBI team, and you're much higher in the rankings than I am. I'm like twice your ranking, but I see that you have Garrett Crochet, and I'm kind of curious what you saw in him before the season. And then I also noticed that you have who was it? The Astros first baseman, and I was kind of wondering Singleton. I was kind of wondering what you saw to what you make of Jose Abreu coming back.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, Garrett Crochet. Crochet is a guy I remember when he first came into the league, being really intrigued about velocity, from the left side, and his ability to strike guys out. And one of the things, the fact that the White Sox basically didn't have hardly anybody in the starting rotation, didn't have healthy arms in the starting rotation to start the year, and Crochet ended up being their opening day starter. The fact that they would put him in there, give him that role, and let him go, I can't remember exactly how many innings he pitched on opening day, but it was a lot more than you would think from a guy who'd never started a game in the major leagues before. So I was very intrigued by that, the strikeout ability. He's had a couple of bumps in the road and some rough starts, but overall, the strikeout to walk ratio has been really good. And for a team that's been pretty crappy, he's been quite a pickup. And if you got him for fantasy leagues, you had to get him early. And the great thing about picking up guys early that stick is they get to contribute the entire season, and they don't cost you anything in the draft. So it's kind of free money, found money to some degree. Other question was Singleton. I don't know. I think he's going to be better than Jose Abreu. I don't think Jose Abreu last year started really, really poorly and was able to come on toward the end of the year, pick things up, and be a reasonably competent contributor for them. I don't know if he can catch lightning in a bottle twice, and for that reason, I think they feel like they owe it to him because they signed him to a 2-year deal. I think. I hope there's not an option or anything like that for next year, but
they still owe $19 million next year. I just heard that today.
Yeah, that's not great. But obviously they want to see if they can get him back on track, if he can contribute, maybe just kind of in the clubhouse more so than on the field. And Singleton is a guy that has had certainly his ups and downs throughout his career. Maybe that's part of mentoring, is part of why he's there. Singleton, I think, is an okay player. I don't think he's a difference maker, but in terms of my TGFBI team, I needed somebody at first base because I had my regular starter hurt or something along those lines, and he was the best available.
Well, with Abreu, I heard they have open auditions. They're looking for somebody new to bang on the garbage can.
I'll tell you what, Jose Abreu was a guy that when he came into the league or was getting ready to come into the league, we had one of our reporters, a bilingual reporter, talk to somebody that had either scouted him or had worked with him in Cuba and just had ridiculously rave reviews. And when our reporter kind of was working on that story, I was able to pick his brain a little bit. And I remembered that off season, that draft season, I was just said, okay, I'm going to go all in on Jose Abreu, to the point where, every time I was on the radio or when I was writing stuff or when I was at spring training, I was like doing, Jose Abreu was like the number one topic of discussion for me. I sort of became the Jose Abreu guy. And obviously he had a very good rookie year, and I got a lot of mileage out of that for sure. So I think for a guy that I have stuck with for so long, I probably will stick with him a little bit too long. In fact, I drafted him on my AL Labor team this year, and had to just have him on the bench while he was in the minor leagues, and activate him again this week because the league is so shallow, or so the league is so deep. I mean, he got an RBI, so woohoo! That's 4 on the year now.
Related to that, what do you make of these? It's always kind of what your answer there brought up a point, is these players that come from another country, in Abreu's case, Cuba, go straight to the majors, no minors, so you don't really know exactly what you're getting, basically. But what do you make of these the Japanese pitchers coming over and dominating? I don't know if anybody predicted, especially in Shota Manga, the performance he's put up so far.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, from everything I had read and the reports that I had seen about Yamamoto and the dominance that he'd had in Japan, it would not have shocked me if Yamamoto was the guy that was putting up the 0.78 ERA this year in his first few starts. The fact that he's kind of struggled and Imanaga has been so good, I think just shows how imprecise some things are. And it doesn't have to be the Japanese players either. I mean, we see what happened with Jackson Holiday, Jackson Churio. You know, those guys were almost as hyped as much or maybe more than Yamamoto was or Imanaga was, and they have not performed up to expectations. So I do think that there's a lot more risk reward kind of thing with the unknown, like those guys. I mean, we kind of have an idea of what players that we've seen, at least have read about in the minor leagues, could do, what some of their flaws, strengths, weaknesses, whatever. But for these guys coming over from Japan or Korea or Cuba or wherever, we don't have the benefit of that. And I think that's why you would like see draft positions, average draft positions for Yamamoto, especially for this year, from second round to fourth or fifth round sometimes. Imanaga was maybe fourth round to seventh or eighth round. And it's one of those where I kind of look at it. I think I've got 14 different leagues, from sim leagues to points leagues to rotisserie leagues. I feel like in these cases, I want to have like one share of those guys. So I will overpay sometimes to get a Yamamoto on a team, just so that I have one opportunity. Wyatt Langford, another guy, maybe took him a little higher than normal, just to be able to see what it's like getting in on the ground floor. And like with Jose Abreu, sometimes, you know, it's great payoff and you look really smart. And other times, you know, guys can, you know, Hideki Irabu, remember when he came over? Same sort of fanfare, really. You know, going to the Yankees, you thought you had, you know, a superstar in waiting, you know, and you didn't. So it's a lot more hit or miss on those guys that we don't have as much information on, which makes sense.
I had a question about, so there's a generation of people that grew up playing Madden football, and word is that because these players, you know, had done so many going for, you know, two versus, you know, going for it on fourth and stuff like that, that it has changed the philosophy at the pro level as to, you know, what strategy teams look at. Do you think that baseball sims have the same chance to drive strategy in the game, or is it a case where the sample size is 160 games versus, you know, 16 in the season, so it's just going to get played out, you know, on the field as opposed to, you know, on the computer?
You know, I think with the work that Bill James did and the work that Baseball Prospectus has done, that the discussion of some of those things, you know, having your best on-base hitter, your best hitter for on-base lead off, you know, getting your best players up at the top of the lineup rather than having what was, you know, traditionally, you know, the number two hitter was a Felix Mion, you know, a guy that can handle the bat and get the runner over and that sort of thing. I think baseball may have been, you know, the simulation and the strategy in sim games has been kind of pulled along by the groundbreaking sabermetric research, to where, you know, when I first started playing in this Dynasty League Baseball League, I kind of knew from what I had, you know, what I had gathered and what I had learned writing about baseball and fantasy baseball and everything else, kind of learned those basics, if you will, of, you know, having your, highest leverage reliever pitch in the 7th and the 8th inning if the game is on the line then, rather than saving him for the ninth. And so I feel like that those concepts, were kind of pulled into sim games to where you could be, a traditional Buck Showalter type manager and keep your ace closer in the bullpen in a playoff game. There you go. There's a great Jays moment, right? Anyway, and you can do that, but you're probably going to lose if somebody else is using the more advanced sabermetric concepts. So, but I totally think that in football, those kind of have moved at a similar pace to where, the idea of going for it on 4th down, and people have learned that by playing Madden, and as a result, the research into that has kind of come as a result of what people maybe innately know is the right thing to do or figure out is the right thing to do, and then there's research that goes into that later on to kind of back that up.
One of the things we've learned, Matthew, doing these things, is that Major League Baseball teams are using simulations quite a bit to help their managers and their coaches. Even when they're hiring, what would you do in this situation? And it really has changed the game. And I believe it was at Saber 50 in Baltimore when, and I can't think of his name, but he was high up, very respected.
Hans Van Sluten. Hans Van Sluten.
No. This was a guy. This is one of the guys with the Orioles.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the name escapes me as well. Yeah, one of the Orioles guys. Yeah.
Anyway, he basically said, if most teams are using it, and if they're not, they're too far behind. The use of simulations, etc.
Are they using an off-the-shelf product, or are they doing something that they've designed in-house?
Interestingly,
I know I've read blurbs that Theo Epstein plays out of the park and stuff.
One of the guys that we had interview with one of the games, and I can't remember, early on they were actually using it out of the box, but then they actually called him and they worked with him a bit, and then they started customizing it. So I think, in many cases they're customizing to their own now, but I believe years ago they probably just took them out of the box and tried it.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I've heard many sim proponents say, if a major league manager just played, a game of Stratomatic or whatever, just sit them down and play a game of Stratomatic, that they might, be more easily persuaded to kind of change some of their tactics. They'd be able to see, that's what baseball, for so long, it's, the traditions of this is what a, leadoff hitter is. This is what a number 9 hitter is, that sort of thing.
Do you think though, Steve, that they've lost the ability to manage with their eyes?
I think that's partly some collateral damage. Yes. And, I think about Dusty Baker. Dusty Baker kind of is in that gray area where, he's a very good players manager and very good people manager. And the Astros were such an analytically designed and forward organization. So I can see how, some of the things that Dusty did were head scratchers to me. Why is he hitting Kyle Tucker 6th all the time? That sort of thing. But yet there are certainly some occasions when he would make a move that did work out. And I think, he even kind of alluded to some of that when he announced his retirement about, the bloggers and people always questioning his moves. I think too, he might have faced some backlash as well from the folks in the front office that wanted him to be more analytical, and he didn't want to. So yeah, I think if you lean too much, it's that stats versus scouting debate, I think, all over again. You lean too much on one over the other, and don't mix them appropriately, then you're going to lose out in some degree, and you're not going to get the maximum efficiency. Now, where that needle goes in that continuum, we're all trying to figure out. Some people are doing a better job of that than others, though.
Yeah, I'm sure that the Rays did it over again, Snell would have pitched a bit longer.
Yeah.
Jays, Barrios would have. Yeah, I'm really feeling that a lot of the newer managers, I mean, they've lost that ability to use their eyes. And even the players, and it was interesting because the players commented, or there's been some comments this past week in Detroit. Sorry, everybody, again, the Jays, but when the power outage happened in Detroit and they couldn't have their iPads, they ended up being more engaged in the game, watching the stuff, because when they're watching their iPads, they're not watching the little things that are happening out on the field. And, you know, I think they, you know, in a lot of cases, they need to go back to a little bit, but, you know, the analytics have been driven so hard, you know, as you were saying about the needle, I think it's just gone too far one way. And I think we will see it come back a bit, but, you know, there's things in the game that I know we'll never see again. I mean, you know, pitchers throwing 5, let alone, you know, they said 10, 15, 20 complete games. If they threw 5 now, it would be, you know, the unicorn. It's disappointing.
Yeah, I will say one other thing along those lines too. You know, a lot of the younger managers may be, you know, reluctant to do something that might be against the analytics, that maybe a more veteran manager would have the confidence to go ahead and do because he's got that experience. And I think that's one of the things too. A lot of the criticism of analytics is, you know, is centered around managing the game from the you know, the front office suite. And that is a danger, because you can lose some of that, you know, long, you know, experience, that knowledge that you've had from being in the game for so long, and being able to recognize things that, you know, analytics wouldn't uncover, especially during the game.
Yeah, I mean, just another example, and then I'm sorry, everybody, but you know, now when a pitcher gets to 90 pitches, they're looking to see if they're coming out. Whereas if you went to Jack Morris and said, "Oh, you're coming out because you've thrown 90 pitches," I don't think anybody could repeat what he would tell you. You know, there's stories about how when Cito went to take him out, one of his first things, you know, and Jack told him to essentially go sit back down. And, you know, Cito had to say, "Well, you know, we got some good guys down there to help you out." But yeah, I mean, you know, it's just completely changed. And I think we've lost some things that we'll never see again.
Yep.
Sig Medhall, is that how you say his name? That was the Orioles assistant GM. So
Yeah, it was sick.
Last year, 2023, at our SABR Day celebration here in St. Louis, we had Bill DeWitt III, who's the Cardinals team president, and I actually asked him. He emphasized analytics, and I asked him, is that why Mike Schilt got fired? Is that he didn't fully embrace the analytics? And if you remember, the Cardinals had an amazing 17-game win streak, the most wins, longest streak in team history, end of 21, playoffs year after year after year. And he kind of said that's part of it, but he didn't want to go into details. I'm sure there's other stuff they clashed about, but you know, we're sitting here in St. Louis and we kind of miss being in the playoffs every year. So we'd be happy to have that back for sure.
No,
Can I ask you a question?
there was definitely some friction between Schilt and Mozeliak and the folks in the front office. And but I don't know. I don't know that you can attribute the winning streaks to you know, Mike Schilt's managerial skills or anything like that too. And had they kept him around, I don't know that things would have been measurably better than they are, today. That's just one of those things that's baseball, Susan, kind of things.
I'm really interested in AI, and I'm curious as to your impressions as a writer, what impact that's having on you. I know that, breaking down a box score lends itself to machine analysis, and you can get some basic kind of retrospective coverage. Is AI coming for your job? Is AI making it easier for you to focus on the creative stuff that you enjoy versus, the grunt work, or what's your impression?
It's a kind of a scary thing, actually. And I have not delved into AI much at all. I one of the things I'm afraid of is, if I were to say to AI, write a fantasy baseball column on the 10, hottest players in baseball right now in the style of Steve Gardner, what it would spit out.
Right.
And there have been several high profile instances of, Sports Illustrated was one. One of the Gannett papers had another, where things that were not labeled as AI generated got out there, and when in fact it was. So again, I think it's another area where, it gives people the opportunity and reason to distrust the media in general. And I think that's one of the things you have to, as a writer, develop a relationship with your readers to where they trust you. And, if you tell them, if you're going to use AI to do something, I feel like you have to tell them what you had it do.
Mhm.
And that's, just being transparent in that regard, I think is the best solution. I don't know, that everyone is going to follow those best practices. And I don't think that the industry really knows what the best practices are, because it's powerful. It can do a lot of things. And I have heard people say that they've used AI to help them generate charts and, leaderboards or whatever. But it's something that is very, very new, and I'm really unsure of exactly what it can do and what I want it to do, if I want it to do. And so for that reason, I haven't really delved into it much at all. But it's certainly something that we all are going to have to deal with at some point, probably sooner rather than later.
Now, if they backed a truckload of money up for a Steve Gardner voice chatbot, to do articles in your voice, would that be something that you'd be interested in, or is that just your legacy is, I want to go in as, having done all my own stuff?
Yeah, I'm old school in that regard. It's I want everything to be authentic, and that's the way I am. And so obviously can't say 100% sure what you would do if they did back up that truck, but I feel pretty confident that I would just say, all good.
Matt, you can back up a truck to my house anytime, especially if it's US dollars, because I'm in Canada, and one of your dollars is worth almost $1 million of ours these days.
Hey, maybe it would help me build that Hall of Fame building for fantasy sports writers.
It just might. I outside of SABR, I'm actually a post-secondary educator. Depending where I am, it's either instructor or professor. And this whole AI stuff is a nightmare. Not so much for me, because I teach business and accounting, and I'm old school with and required to by CPA Canada to have so many of my grading done by sit-down face-to-face exams. So that saves us. But I know my colleagues it's been a nightmare, and many of them are going back to sit down exams instead of papers. Because, you know, we get something good, and I think there's some really good things with AI, especially in the healthcare industry. You get abuses, and that's what we're seeing at the schools.
I would imagine
Hey,
go ahead.
sorry, my name's Paul. I'm new. Just joined SABR last. And apologize. First, a true pleasure, and it's really an honor to. Second,
Paul, I think we're having trouble with you. It's telling me your network bandwidth is low. If you want, you can type your questions into the chat if you're able to do that. I do want to welcome you to SABR, and but hopefully we can help you out. But right now, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm not getting any voice from you, Paul.
Yeah, the audio was cutting out for me there, definitely.
hey, I turned my video off. Or can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah.
Much better.
So to the question really quickly, is you mentioned earlier how one of the best parts of the game, and I find this true for myself as well, is being able to think through the strategy, think through what you would do in various different situations. So my question is, as some of the recent rule changes have gone to shorten the length of the baseball game, shorten the amount of time that one actually has to think these things through, whether you're the manager or whether you're a fan in the stands. Do you think that is in consideration at all? Do you think that the game is going in a right direction or wrong direction, as far as that being a unique aspect of the strategy and the thinking about and observing everything that's going on versus this drive to speed up the games, whether it's I don't have to list all the rule changes. Hopefully you understand what I'm getting at or asking here.
Yeah, I think one of the things, when you speed up the decision-making process, you have less time to do all of these analyses and use all the data that's at your disposal. So, part of it, as we were talking about the continuum between, managing with your gut and managing by the numbers, that maybe it brings a little bit more of that, instantaneous decision-making back into the game. I can't really say, maybe the pitch timer cuts a couple of seconds off or whatever, gives you a couple seconds fewer. But I liken it to the same sort of thing as being on the clock in a fantasy draft. And, if the clock is 1 minute till you make your pick, you can generally kind of look at a couple of things, check your cheat sheet, whatever, and make a pick. But if you cut that clock down to, 30 seconds or 20 seconds, then those decision-making processes need to be sped up. And it's more, you're going on what you know rather than what you can look up. And I think that's possibly one of the, things as the game evolves, we kind of fall so the pendulum swings a little bit the other way rather than the way that it has been going.
Well, you just explained why I don't win any of the auction ones I go in. Because I don't know enough. I'm late to baseball, to be perfectly honest, being Canadian. Lots of hockey, but I've really only gotten deep into baseball, I would say, in the last 15 years or so. So, open it up here, guys. You got questions? You got specific questions about your teams?
Well, I did.
Anything going
I
on
did-
Major League?
I just want to say that we can all stop worrying because baseball's future is brightened so much with the recent announcement that Angel Hernandez is out. That really everything else pales in comparison. So life is good.
That was one of the most enjoyable stories I've done in a long time. I helped put together a piece today of Angel Hernandez's greatest misses, I guess we could call it, rather than greatest hits.
How did you have room for it?
I tell you, that's what I'm thankful that the internet is unlimited. I have to say, there were many of them.
Did
We
you hear
certainly did not
about,
hit all of them for sure.
do you have any information about the financial agreement?
Do not. But apparently they were in negotiations for a while, and his last game was,
May
beginning
9th,
of
I
the
think.
month
Yeah.
sometime. So I get the impression, and this is, not rooted in anything other than just from what I've heard from reporters and everything else, is that they were trying to get him to retire or step down or whatever in the off season,
Right.
and he wouldn't do it. He's a stubborn guy. If we needed any more evidence, and just some of the horrible calls that he made this season, I think might have been the last straw for the commissioner's office and whoever else, and they just said, "All right, stop, take a break, Angel. Let's work on these negotiations for a while." My guess is they probably paid him for the rest of the year. He's got a pension after he retires, and that's enough for MLB to tell him to go away.
So who's the next Angel?
I don't know.
For me, CB Buckner has not been doing well, or
No.
CJ Buckner, but the one who I swear he absolutely hates the Jays, and I saw him down in St. Louis at the first Sabre I went to, Sabre 49, is Vic Carpazza, where he had 3 calls at first base, 3 or 4 first base overturned in the same game. I know he is somebody's son-in-law, but I do not like Vic. That's for sure. I know the Jays are probably going to lose when Vic's behind the plate.
All right, I made a trade today. I was loaded. This is NL only. I know you play NL only labor 12 team. I assume your setup is the same: 5 outfielders, corner infielder, midfield. So I was loaded. Here, let me look it up real fast. I was loaded at middle infield because I picked up Gonzalez. I also picked up Luciano, but apparently his defense is hurting him. And I traded the Rockies shortstop for Jake Berger.
Right, so Tovar
for Berger, yeah.
Okay.
I had no corner infield. I was playing Cody Clemens there.
Okay. I mean, that's the thing, especially in leagues, that are that deep. Just having a guy who plays regularly is
Better
essential.
than nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, and the replacement. I don't know how many usable players are on your waiver wire from week to week, but in labor, there are hardly any.
Yeah, it's the same.
So yeah, I was Adam Duvall was the guy I picked up this week who was magically available, but that's the kind of player you luck into, and if there's anybody available. So yeah, if you've got a surplus, that's a good way to use it.
I also have Otto Lopez. Hopefully he keeps running out there.
There you go.
Um,
Those
All right,
guys you can
I've got
pick up, but you have to do
I've
it.
got
You have to do it quick.
two questions for you. First of all, there's so many different flavors of rotisserie fantasy. Do you have any preference? Do you have, you enjoy daily versus weekly or 5x5, or I guess, yeah, do you have any preferences?
I have one very strong preference, and it's because I play in a whole bunch of leagues. I hate leagues with daily moves. And especially if you're able to pick up guys off the waiver wire any day, anytime. That to me is just horrible because I can't be glued to the computer, and it's a lot of times it's whoever sees news first benefits. And while I'm certainly online an awful lot during the day, I can't always be working on my fantasy teams during those hours. So it to me, life gets in the way of making those daily moves, and you've got lineup changes, 10 minutes before first pitch, that sort of thing. And I hate to see leagues, titles, that sort of thing decided by those types of kind of random situations. So I'm in favor of weekly lineup moves. I'm not opposed with the NFBC and other leagues that have Friday changes for hitters. We went to that in our mixed labor draft league, and the reviews so far we did for the first time this year, and the reviews so far are very good. So I'm inclined to keep that. But otherwise, I love Roto. Head to head is a little bit kind of dependent on luck. Sometimes you can have the best team and end up just fizzling out when it comes playoff time. So I feel like I do better the deeper the leagues are, and the more you have to make decisions and stick with them.
When I started out late 80s, early 90s, you could have an advantage just by having a deep knowledge of the league versus the average owner. But I feel like there's so much information out there now that it's tough to gain an edge.
Yep.
But what would you do in a situation, for example, I have Acuna on one team. Would you try to stop the bleeding and pick up somebody as a temporary fix, and then also look and see, okay, is like I don't know, a James Wood or some prospect coming up that might help me out in August and September? I guess what would your strategy be in that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a redraft league, or not a keeper league or anything like that. You're just worried about what's going on for the rest of this year.
No, keeper league.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, you certainly want to hold on to him and hope that things go well in his recovery and everything. But in terms of trying to fix your team now, I mean, yeah, you could go one of two ways. You can go the Adam Duvall route, or Tommy Pham, or whoever, just a marginal player to kind of stop the bleeding. Or you can go to that kind of high ceiling guy you may have to wait a little while for, but yet he could do. James Wood, for instance, is a good example. Even if he gets called up end of June, something like that, and gives Tommy Pham a 1 month head start, if he's playing every day, he could put up even better numbers throughout the course of the year. I think the best strategy, if there is one, losing Acuna, to try and find maybe somebody to fill in now, but keep an eye out for those high upside guys. I think if it's a mixed league, somebody like a Wyatt Langford, or you're probably not going to get those guys in a keeper league, but somebody with that kind of high upside that may have had a disappointing start to the season that could pick it up might be worth trading for.
Yeah, I've seen in certain leagues where people, they drop Jackson Holiday. It's like he's still a number one prospect. He struggled for a few weeks, but that would be somebody I'm stashing in my reserves until I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, even like a Jackson Churio who's playing but certainly has not, come close to being, the top prospect kind of guy that a lot of people were hyping him up to be coming into the season.
Right,
Uh,
right.
I was wondering, Steve, if you might have any comment on jurisdictions in North America that have decreed fantasy baseball to be gambling. I remember the big fight CDM had about 15 years ago. And there were a lot of states at the time saying, fantasy baseball was gambling, and obviously it's not. And the reason I bring it up is because I live in Ontario, and with the advent of government sanctioned gambling, the Ontario government has decreed that fantasy baseball is gambling, and any operators have to give them $250,000 and a slice of the pie. So here I am in a province of 10 million people, and I can't play, and I love it. And I just can't imagine there's too many places that are still thinking that way.
No. And we went through, I remember specifically for the daily fantasy games, when DraftKings and FanDuel kind of first started hitting the big time, USA Today ended up putting together for a very short period of time its own daily fantasy game. And that was, kind of the argument that we were trying to make as we were trying to get, be legal in all the numbers of different states that we were looking to get into. That fantasy baseball is a game of skill and not a game of chance. And that was the difference. A lot of people didn't see it that way. I had a hard time convincing my wife and kids that it's not gambling. And, part of it, the wagering part, I can see where that's clearly you're, putting up money to try and win money. But the one thing, I guess the loophole that we were able to kind of thread was that if you played in a game that did not have an entry fee, a fantasy game, that was just kind of a game for fun. And you could, house that online, and that would be okay. I think FanDuel and DraftKings in some states where they're not allowed, where sports gambling is not allowed, that they were okay if you didn't have a prize pool or anything like that. You just did it as a free game. So obviously you can have your side bets or whatever, and you'd be doing just like people used to do back in the day. But it is very difficult because as we learned at USA Today when the CDM lawsuit came, Major League Baseball wanted to have licensing fees and for using the players' names and stats. And eventually the courts determined, and thankfully they did, that those were public information that could be used and should be available to everyone, those names and those numbers. And that's kind of what allowed fantasy sports and fantasy baseball here in the US to proceed. Whereas it could have been one of those where you'd have to pay MLB, a huge sum of money, and MLB could just cherry pick which people it wanted to be in business with, and the rest.
Yeah, well, it's like you say, it's interesting that MLB that did a complete 180 and basically embraces gambling.
Yeah.
And yet I've still got to put up with this crapola here. And I mean, I've contacted the Alcohol and Gaming Commission here in Ontario, and they basically just blew me off. They say, it was pretty much thanks for your reply, it'll be forwarded on to somebody. And so I waited several weeks and I said, well, who'd you forward it on to? Because I haven't heard anything back. And you're just beating your head against a brick wall here. And it's very maddening because I love it and would love to play some more, but I can't.
Yeah.
It just drives
I
me
hear
batty.
you. And it makes no sense if you're,
Well,
especially.
as Derek and everybody in Canada will agree, sports on TV right now in Canada is just one gambling ad after another. It's so bad in Ontario, I can't hit the remote fast enough. And it's even in Ontario, I think it's particularly bad because the hosts of the broadcast, the guys doing the talking heads, and the people doing the sports broadcasting are all pimping the gambling. But there's nobody keeps track of who's done well. It's just you get some expert on there who's alleged to know what they're talking about. But the government won't let me have my bit of fun.
Yeah. The logic just is inescapable.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I'm willing to bet Utah doesn't allow it.
Probably
Steve,
true.
I'm betting Utah doesn't allow it.
All right, can
State
you
of
bet
no
from where
fun.
you are? Could you
Oh no,
could you
the
put that
state of no
wager in?
fun. Right? No alcohol. You can have 7 wives, but no fun.
Yeah.
Not good.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Anybody else got questions for Steve? We're getting over time here, but I don't want to cut anybody off. You know,
I
Tim,
was
how
just wondering,
are
my son and I, my son Brennan and I were talking about the low batting averages this year. It's like historically low batting averages, which, okay, if you talk sabermetrically, batting average isn't a great stat, whatever, but it's part of rotisserie tradition. We still use batting average, right? And then we looked at the top 15 ERA leaders, and I don't think any of the top, probably, I think 15th was Zach Wheeler, and Chris Sale is in there, but he's coming off a couple of injured, seasons. So looking at the top 15, I don't think any of us would have named those players at the beginning of the year. Seth Lugo is leading the league right now.
Right. Ranger Suarez.
Ronaldo Lopez. I won't go through the entire list, but just bring it up on ESPN or MLB or whatever your favorite site is. It's pretty crazy what the list is right now. So just wondering what your take is on, I guess my assumption with the banning of, the banning the shift and certain things would help raise, batting to a certain extent. And it just seems like it's had the opposite effect.
Yeah. And I think the margin for what banning the shift does, I mean, because the players are still, they can still move the same amount, physically they can move the same amount now. And when they get placed in one position, sometimes batter hits the ball to where they would have been if they, when they were shifted. The difference in the banning the shift, I think, is so small that it was one of those things that MLB wanted to do to say that they were doing something, but it had virtually no effect on batting average on balls in play. I wonder if there's something again with the composition of the baseball. And one of the stories or one of the columns that I did early on in the season, before I think we'd even gotten to the end of April, talked about, exit velocities and fly ball distances and the correlation and the fact that they were down this year to start the season, even if you adjusted for weather, and you compared it to last April, same number of games. And it ended up that, the home run to fly ball ratio was measurably lower this year than it was last year, and more in line with the year, was it 21 or 22, or we had the mush ball, for lack of a better word. So it makes me wonder sometimes too, if MLB has a hand in it, if they're not competent enough to manipulate it, but there's just some variety, tolerance, or whatever with the baseball. I mean, that's the one thing, the variable that we can't see and we don't get a whole lot of data on. that could be contributing that doesn't really get put into, the common space where we know what's happening.
My one team right now is going to annihilate our league record, which used to be the worst batting average ever in our league in over 30 years was 238, and I'm currently hitting 219. But I'm in third place because I'm doing fine in everything else. But I cannot get anyone to hit above like 210.
Warm weather. It's got to change.
I hope it helps.
And just your guys and not your opponents.
I'm going to tell them to start butting for a hit pretty soon here.
I believe it.
Paul mentions in the chat here that the vertical integration of MLB owning everything, including manufacturing, the baseball manufacturing, the jerseys and everything, isn't being reported enough, but is affecting everything.
Yeah, I think so. And the more that you consolidate, the more you can keep all of those details, from coming out, or a lot more of the details from coming out, because you don't have, Rawlings making baseballs, by themselves and then, producing them and giving them, selling them to Major League Baseball. Once it's all owned under the same umbrella, you can keep a lot of those things in-house, as opposed to public knowledge or things that you could find out. I think it's a good point.
We need that deep throat whistleblower to come out.
Indeed. Would be good to have, for sure.
Well, Steve, I don't know where an hour and a half has gone, but it has. I hope you'll come back.
I would love to. This has been great. This has been a great
Thanks for
discussion.
doing this.
If you're
Yeah,
up in
thank you.
Minnesota, the first full week of August, check out SABR. Come to the convention. All of you, actually, not just Steve.
Yeah, we've got what is it? Four Twins Hall of Famers going to be speaking, right? Peru, Blyleven, Cott, and Oliva will be there.
Nice.
Yeah, your buddy Rod Carew, Derek. I know you're trying to find a rookie card to get him to sign.
Yeah. I wish I would have bought that rookie card about 40 years ago, though.
Yeah, no doubt.
Do we have a simulation set up for that?
We don't have a tournament
guest.
like we did last year, but we do have a guest.
We have a guest who has come on before, but we're not ready to announce it yet. We're not going to have a table set up. Derek wants to experience more this year, and I don't blame him. There's so much I learn so much every year. Especially last year after getting a chance to meet Mike Veck, even though he doesn't own them anymore. I'm definitely wanting to go see the St. Paul team play.
Yep.
I understand on the Sunday, actually, it's the nun who gives massages has a bobblehead on the Sunday. So I don't know what I'm going to do there, but it ended up being cheaper that I stay all day Sunday and fly out Monday. So I'm gonna experience Minnesota or Minneapolis. Sorry, I realized my mistake there. Anybody want to finish up with anything?
No, this was fantastic. Thank you for joining
It's been a
us.
pleasure.
Yep.
Thank you for
thank you
inviting
very
me.
much.
Enjoyed it.
All right, everybody, good luck with your fantasy teams this year. Tim, I don't know. I guess good luck. I guess you'll be simming until they change that
Oh
rule.
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I gotta do it on my own.
There you go.
Ciao.
Tim, how are the London Nationals doing? I think I saw something. They just started the season.
The majors. Oh, they're off to a half decent start, but it's nights right now, baby. The London Knights, junior hockey.
Oh yeah. No, I've been
Tomorrow,
watching. Before I left London, I had seasons tickets for the Knights.
Big game tomorrow night.
I went through all the 2005. So I know it's all Knights there. I know what it's about.
Yeah.
You have fun with that.
You bet.
And
Oh,
have fun at the
Oh.
ball games too.
you bet. Okay, see you guys.
See you guys.
All right, take care. Have a good night.